The dawn of 1963 in Sydney, Australia, broke on a scene that would soon captivate and confound the nation. On New Year's Day, along the banks of the tranquil Lane Cove River, in the then respectable suburb of Chatswood, a discovery was made that would launch one of Australia's most enduring and perplexing mysteries. The holiday atmosphere, usually filled with the promise of a fresh start, was shattered by the grim reality found amidst the bushy scrub near the water's edge. The initial discovery was made by two young boys likely out seeking discarded golf balls, a common pastime in the area. Their innocent search took a dark turn when they stumbled upon the figure of a man lying face down on the ground. Initially, the youngsters might have assumed they had simply found someone sleeping off the excesses of New Year's Eve celebrations. However, an hour or so later, returning along the same track, they noticed the man was still in the same position and appeared unwell. Closer inspection revealed a disturbing purplish discoloration on his face, and a trickle of blood had emerged from his right nostril. It was clear this was no mere slumber. The man was dead. And upon the arrival of the police, the scene took on an even more bizarre dimension. Just a short distance away, approximately 12 to 17 meters, in a shallow dip right on the edge of the river, lay the body of a woman. She was found lying face up, partially unclothed. The skirt of her floral dress was bunched around her waist, and her bra had been pulled down. Her own underpants were some distance away, and a pair of men's underpants lay between her bare feet. This was Mrs. Margaret Chandler. Similar to the man, there were no obvious signs of violence on her body, but the overwhelming stench of vomit and human excrement suggested a sudden and violent illness. The unusual circumstances of the discovery immediately indicated that these were not natural deaths, and the puzzle of what had transpired by the Lane Cove River began to unfold. Even the initial responders were confronted with a perplexing scene, setting the stage for a mystery that would endure for decades. Who were they? Liv's interrupted. The deceased man was quickly identified as Dr. Gilbert Stanley Bogle, a highly respected physicist working at the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, often known as CSIRO. Born in 1924 in New Zealand, Bogle was considered a brilliant scientist and had been a Rhodes Scholar, earning a PhD from Oxford University. He was married to Vivienne Mary Rich and had 4 children. At the time of his death, Bogle was on the cusp of a significant career move, preparing to leave Australia with his family to take up a prestigious 2-year appointment in quantum electronics at Bell Telephone Research Laboratories in New Jersey, USA. His impending departure added a layer of tragedy to his sudden demise, suggesting a life full of potential abruptly cut short. The woman found with Bogle was identified as Mrs. Margaret Olive Chandler, born Margaret Olive Morfitt, in 1934. She was the older sister of the screenwriter and author Tony Morfitt. Margaret was married to Geoffrey Arnold Chandler, a scientific photographer who also worked at the CSIRO in the same building as Bogle. They had 2 young children. By all accounts, Margaret was a housebound mother, and her connection with the esteemed physicist Bogle would prove to be more than professional. Their relationship was revealed to be an affair, a liaison that had blossomed recently. Gilbert Bogle and Margaret Chandler had met for the first time just a little over a week prior on Christmas Eve of 1962. Despite their respective marriages, an attraction had clearly formed. This connection continued to develop at a New Year's Eve party held in Chatswood, where both were in attendance. At the end of the evening, Margaret accepted Bogle's offer of a lift home. Instead of heading directly home, however, they drove towards the Lane Cove River, a location known locally as Lover's Lane, suggesting a planned romantic encounter. The fact that both individuals were married to others and their affair was in its early stages added a layer of complexity and potential scandal to the unfolding events. The party they had left was a relatively sedate gathering of around 20 people, described as men in suits and ties and ladies in lame dresses. It was from this seemingly ordinary social event that the two embarked on a fateful journey to the riverbank. The location where the bodies were discovered, along the Cove River, was known to be a relatively secluded area, a place where couples sought privacy, earning it the local moniker of Lovers' Lane. While offering a degree of seclusion, the area was not necessarily the most idyllic, described by some accounts as dirty and occasionally smelly. However, Bogle's car was found in good order, and the couple had even brought a piece of carpet from the vehicle to lie on, indicating a degree of planning for their rendezvous. The condition of the bodies at the scene was particularly striking and contributed significantly to the mystery. Dr. Bogle was found lying face down, half naked from the waist down, but with his suit pants neatly laid on top of his legs and his jacket placed perfectly on his back. A piece of carpet, later identified as coming from his own car, was also found draped over his back underneath his jacket. Mrs. Chandler was discovered approximately 15 meters away, lying face up and also half naked, with her top removed. Her body was entirely covered with broken-up cardboard beer boxes. This peculiar arrangement of the bodies immediately raised questions. Was this the work of a murderer attempting to conceal the scene, or was there another explanation? The initial thought that Chandler might have covered Bogle and then herself was later discounted, suggesting someone else had likely covered her body as well. Adding to the perplexing nature of the scene was the presence of vomit and excreta near both bodies. This strongly indicated that both individuals had experienced a sudden and severe physical reaction consistent with poisoning. However, despite the implications of poisoning, there were no visible signs of violence or struggle on either body. Later in the investigation, the detail emerged that Margaret Chandler's handbag was found approximately 4 kilometers away in bushland, near the homes of a relative of a greyhound trainer who became a suspect. This discovery further complicated the picture, raising questions about how the handbag ended up so far from the scene and whether it held any crucial clues. The discovery of the bodies on a public holiday, New Year's Day, meant that the initial forensic examination was delayed by a significant 36 hours. This delay, while perhaps unavoidable, could have potentially impacted the ability to detect certain rapidly acting toxins. The police launched an extensive investigation, reportedly exploring around 1,000 different hypotheses regarding the cause of death. This vast number of possibilities considered highlights the utter bewilderment faced by investigators from the outset. In May 1963, a coroner's inquest was held to try and shed light on the mysterious deaths. During the proceedings, medical evidence revealed the presence of semen on Dr. Bogle's jacket, suggesting some form of sexual activity had occurred. However, it was also stated that Mrs. Chandler had not had sexual intercourse. The coroner, Mr. J.J. Looms, ultimately concluded that both Bogle and Chandler had died due to acute circulatory failure. This finding, however, was frustratingly vague, as the coroner admitted that the evidence did not permit him to determine the circumstances that led to this circulatory failure. In essence, he stated that their hearts stopped beating or they stopped breathing, but the reason remained unknown. The inquest, despite its thoroughness, ultimately failed to provide any concrete answers, leaving the mystery unresolved. Initial forensic investigations, including toxicology reports, were equally inconclusive. Despite extensive testing for a wide range of known poisons, including drugs like LSD, no definitive traces of any toxic substance were found. This lack of forensic evidence for poisoning only deepened the enigma surrounding the deaths. One of the early theories explored by the police was that a third person might have been involved in covering the bodies. The investigating detectives believed that the coverings were likely done out of modesty by someone who had stumbled upon the scene, rather than by a murderer attempting to conceal a crime. Two individuals came under suspicion in this regard. The first was a voyeur who contacted the police twice using different names, but he was quickly dismissed after interrogation. The prime suspect became a greyhound trainer who regularly walked his dogs on a path near where the bodies were found. He only came forward after his car was identified and, during questioning, claimed to have used a different path that day and denied seeing the bodies. However, his obituary later stated that he was the first to find them, and the theory of modesty as a motive was supported by claims that he was known to be a prude. Given the circumstances, suspicion naturally fell upon those closest to the deceased. The adulterous nature of the relationship between Bogle and Chandler immediately brought Margaret's husband, Geoffrey Chandler, into the spotlight. In the conservative Australia of 1963, a husband seemingly indifferent to his wife's affair was highly unusual and, in the eyes of the police, made him even more suspicious. However, Geoffrey Chandler maintained that he and Margaret had an open relationship and that he was aware of and even condoned her interest in Bogle. Crucially, he had a corroborated alibi for the time of the deaths. He had left the New Year's Eve party early, around 11:30 p.m., ostensibly to buy cigarettes, and had gone to another party in Balmain where he met his own mistress, Pamela Logan. This alibi, supported by Logan's testimony, effectively cleared him of any direct involvement in the deaths. Another theory that emerged focused on a potential jilted lover. Margaret Fowler, a scientifically trained librarian at CSIRO, had a previous on-again, off-again relationship with Dr. Bogle. Given the imbalance in their relationship, with Bogle being a prominent figure and seemingly unlikely to leave his wife for her, and the fact that he had left the CSIRO party with Mrs. Chandler, jealousy was considered a possible motive. However, police investigations into her whereabouts on the night of the party revealed that she was with her husband at another party some distance away, thus providing her with an alibi. The height of the Cold War in 1963 naturally led to speculation involving espionage. Dr. Bogle was a brilliant physicist working on sensitive research at CSIRO, and he was about to move to the United States to work for Bell Laboratories, a major defense and communications company. This timing, coupled with the mysterious nature of his death, fueled theories that he might have been involved in espionage or privy to classified information, making him a target for assassination by either foreign agents or even his own government. Mrs. Bogle herself reportedly believed her husband was assassinated to prevent him from disclosing Australian Atomic Energy Commission security leaks and American espionage improprieties. Geoffrey Chandler later disclosed that he had been a double agent, working for both the Communist Party and the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, further adding to the intrigue. However, no concrete evidence ever emerged to support the espionage theory. In fact, Bogle's research focused on the application of maser technology to radio astronomy, not atomic power. Given the bizarre circumstances of the deaths, the possibility of drug use was also considered. Speculation arose that Bogle and Chandler might have taken LSD and either overdosed or consumed contaminated drugs. However, initial forensic analysis found no trace of LSD. In 1996, further tests were conducted on relic tissue samples in the United States using more sensitive techniques, and these also came back negative for LSD. Furthermore, there have been no documented human deaths solely from an LSD overdose. The Bogle-Chandler case was an instant sensation in the Australian media. The scandalous nature of the affair, the mysterious circumstances surrounding the deaths, and the complete lack of a clear explanation created a perfect storm for intense public interest. In the conservative social climate of 1963 Australia, where even booking a motel room as an unmarried couple was often difficult, the revelations of an adulterous relationship within the scientific community sent shockwaves through society. The involvement of a respected scientist and the wife of his colleague, both from a prominent organization like CSIRO, further amplified the intrigue. Adding to the sensationalism were the unusual details of the discovery, the half-naked bodies, and the bizarre attempts to cover them. The fact that the cause of death remained undetermined only fueled further speculation and gossip. The case also exposed the libertarian activities of a group of left-wing intellectuals in Sydney known as the Sydney Push, with which Geoffrey Chandler was associated, adding another layer of social and political commentary to the unfolding drama. The two main afternoon newspapers in Sydney at the time, The Sun and the Daily Mirror, engaged in a fierce competition to cover the case, often resorting to sensationalism and speculation to capture readers' attention. This tabloid war between the two publications lasted for months, with each trying to outdo the other with new theories and angles, even when factual information was scarce. This intense media scrutiny undoubtedly influenced public opinion and put immense pressure on the police to solve the crime, although the constant barrage of often unfounded speculation may have also hindered the investigation. The editorializing by the newspapers aimed to sway public perception and push the police towards finding a culprit, any culprit, in a case that defied easy explanation. Despite the passage of decades and the emergence of new theories, the Bogle-Chandler mystery has never truly faded from the Australian public consciousness. It remains one of the country's most baffling, unsolved crimes, a subject of ongoing fascination and debate. The enduring nature of the mystery speaks to its unique combination of scandalous circumstances, perplexing forensic evidence, or lack thereof, and the various intriguing, if ultimately unproven, theories that have been proposed over the years. After decades of speculation and unanswered questions, a significant breakthrough in understanding the Bogle-Chandler mystery came from investigative filmmaker Peter Butt. His documentary Who Killed Dr. Bogle and Mrs. Chandler, first aired in 2006, presented a compelling new theory based on extensive research, including unprecedented access to police forensic records. Butt's investigation proposed that the deaths were caused by accidental hydrogen sulfide, or H2S, poisoning emanating from the polluted waters of the Cove River. This theory aligns remarkably well with several key pieces of evidence that had puzzled investigators for decades. One of the most significant clues was a pathology report, reportedly suppressed by the coroner at the time, which revealed a purple discoloration in the victim's blood. This purple hue is a characteristic symptom of hydrogen sulfide poisoning. Furthermore, historical records from the 1940s and 1950s documented numerous complaints from local residents about a persistent rotten egg smell emanating from the Cove River, a smell directly associated with hydrogen sulfide gas. These complaints were often accompanied by reports of nausea, breathing difficulties, and significant fish kills in the river. A year-long study conducted by the Maritime Services Board in response to these issues found that the bottom muds of the river were saturated with hydrogen sulfide to a depth of 50 centimeters, and that very large and rapid releases of the gas could occur, particularly in a section of the river impounded by a weir. The source of this pollution was identified as a flour mill that had been pumping millions of litres of waste into the river since the late 19th century. The most affected location was within a quarter-mile of the weir, precisely where Bogle and Chandler died. Further supporting this theory are the weather conditions on the night of the deaths. It was reported to be very cool and still, conditions that would have allowed high concentrations of the heavier-than-air hydrogen sulfide gas to accumulate in low-lying areas. The location where the couple sought privacy was at water level in a slight depression, surrounded by a bank and mangroves, a typical spot for such a gas to pool in calm conditions. The slight skin abrasions and disturbed clothing found on the victims suggest they were disoriented and tried to leave the area before collapsing. The fact that they were unable to fully correct their clothing indicates that the poisoning likely struck them down suddenly and rapidly. Even a British forensic scientist, after reviewing the case report, suggested that the victims had been gassed. The hydrogen sulfide theory also offers a plausible explanation for the mysterious covering of the bodies. The woman who was a child at the time came forward after Butt's documentary aired, claiming she had found Chandler's handbag some distance away. This location was near the home of a relative of the greyhound trainer who was initially a suspect. The theory suggests that this greyhound trainer, known to be a prude who disliked the sight of bare flesh, might have come across the bodies shortly after the incident. Possibly being in the area for a similar reason, like Lover's Lane, or while walking his dogs, and perhaps not realizing they were dead initially, he may have covered them out of modesty or panic before leaving the scene without reporting it. This scenario fits the evidence and the personality traits attributed to the greyhound trainer. While direct interviews from 1963 are scarce, later documentaries and accounts have provided glimpses into the perspectives of those involved. Geoffrey Chandler, in his book So You Think I Did It, offered his own account of the events and his feelings about being a suspect. Archival news reports and later interviews with police officers involved in the initial investigation reveal the challenges and frustrations they faced in trying to solve a case with so few clear leads. A particularly significant personal account comes from the chief toxicologist on the case, Vivian Mahoney. Years later, Mahoney revealed that he had found a purplish discoloration of the blood during his initial analysis, an anomaly he couldn't explain at the time. He admitted that if he had been aware of the semen found on Bogle's jacket and understood the significance of the purple blood, he might have considered hydrogen sulfide poisoning much earlier in the investigation. This revelation highlights a crucial piece of evidence that was overlooked or not fully understood in the initial stages, potentially due to a lack of communication or focus. Peter Butt's research also uncovered an alleged conversation from 1965 between a Canberra psychologist and a woman who claimed to be an eyewitness to the deaths. While the identities of these individuals were not revealed, the details of the alleged eyewitness account reportedly aligned with the crime scene data and supported the conclusion of death by hydrogen sulfide. Furthermore, as mentioned earlier, a woman who was a child in 1963 came forward after Butt's documentary, providing details about finding Chandler's handbag, which further supported the timeline and the possibility of a passerby at the scene. These later accounts, while not part of the original investigation, offer valuable insights and lend further credence to the hydrogen sulfide theory. The Bogle-Chandler mystery has firmly cemented its place as one of Australia's most baffling and enduring unsolved crimes. For decades, it has captured the imagination of Australians, spawning countless discussions, theories, and media portrayals. The case's unique blend of sex, science, and unexplained death in a seemingly ordinary suburban setting created a mystery that resonated deeply with the public. In a time of significant social change and Cold War anxieties, the Bogle-Chandler case seemed to encapsulate many of the underlying tensions and curiosities of the era. Iconic cases like this often leave a lasting mark on a culture's perception of crime and justice. The Bogle-Chandler mystery, with its enduring lack of a definitive solution for so long, likely contributed to the public's fascination with true crime and the complexities of forensic investigation. The numerous theories that emerged, ranging from the plausible to the outlandish, reflect the public's desire to find an explanation for the inexplicable. While Peter Butt's hydrogen sulfide theory is now widely considered the most likely explanation, the case officially remains unsolved. Without further official investigation or the discovery of new, irrefutable evidence, the mystery, in its formal sense, persists. Nevertheless, Butt's compelling evidence has provided a sense of closure for many, offering a logical and scientifically supported explanation for the tragic deaths of Dr. Gilbert Bogle and Mrs. Margaret Chandler. In the final analysis, the Bogle-Chandler mystery revolves around the tragic deaths of Dr. Gilbert Bogle, a brilliant physicist, and Mrs. Margaret Chandler, the wife of his colleague, on New Year's Day in 1963. Their half-naked bodies were discovered in a secluded spot by the Cove River with no immediate signs of violence. Initial forensic investigations failed to identify a cause of death, leading to decades of speculation involving jealous spouses, Cold War espionage, and experimental drugs. Despite the thoroughness of the initial police investigation and the coroner's inquest, the lack of conclusive evidence left many questions unanswered. Who covered the bodies and why? What exactly transpired in the moments leading up to their deaths? While Peter Butt's hydrogen sulfide theory provides the most convincing explanation to date, supported by historical evidence of river pollution, the physical condition of the bodies, and the later recollections of the toxicologist, it has never been officially confirmed. The Bogle-Chandler mystery remains a potent reminder of the complexities of unsolved crimes and the enduring human fascination with the unknown. It stands as a testament to a time of social change and Cold War anxieties, forever etched in the annals of Australian true crime.